What is good, everybody? Welcome back. We appreciate you joining us on another episode of the 40 Club. Tommy Ashley's here with us. Our guest today is Shammond Williams, a 1998 graduate of the University of North Carolina. We haven't done one of these shows in a while, Tommy, because gosh knows everything else has gotten in the way, but we figured we'd go ahead and throw one back on the fire because we had a chance to talk to Shammond. But we appreciate you guys listening. This is one of the Inside Carolina Network podcasts. Be sure that you can check all of them out. Hit subscribe, download, listen wherever you can on Apple Music, Spotify, what have you. Take a second, give us a 5-star review if you feel so. If you don't feel so moved, then shoot us a note and let us know why you don't like it or why you do like it or what we could do better. You can also watch this on YouTube. As you can see, my glorious face, Tommy's beautiful visage, and Shammond's amazing backdrop of his two both away and home versions of his number 3 that he wore in Chapel Hill. Tommy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Joey. And you talking about faces, we got Shammond with us. And Shammond, I'll let Joey get into the questions, but have you changed a lick since you left Carolina? I mean, what is up with all these athletes coming on this show, Joey? And they all look like the day they left campus.
It's weird. We
look
older and they look the same.
Well, I mean, looks can be deceiving. I can tell you how the body feels sometimes, but I've been blessed in regard to just try to make sure I continue to push myself to stay in shape. And a lot of mornings when I'm getting out there and running, I always have to ask myself, why am I doing this? But I do have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and so they keep me extremely active. And so it's important that I stay in shape to be able to compete with them.
If nothing else, you got to chase them around, right?
Yes, or push one or the other.
So I want to make sure we give you a proper introduction. Usually we kind of tee up your accomplishments and accolades. And I'll start with saying, Shammond, I think you're the first Q we've had on the show. First actual member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. So you definitely break us in that category. But you were at Carolina from 94 to 98, 3 Final Fours, recruited by Coach Smith, played for Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge, and then had a long pro career, wrapping up in 2011. And then on top of that, you coached in college basketball for a little while with a stop at Tulane and at Western Kentucky. So look, man, I'm going to start. Talk to us about your recruiting and how did you get on Carolina's radar, and share with us a little bit about the first time you talked to Coach Smith.
It was quite interesting how I got on North Carolina's radar because I didn't know. When I left high school in 1993, I had no scholarship offers to go to college at all. And so a man by the name of Dan Peterson, who's my godfather, as of today, he gave me an opportunity to go and try out at Fort Union Military Academy, where Fletcher Harris was the head coach, and possibly have an opportunity to do a postgraduate year. And then so I was accepted, and Coach Eric felt like I could be a piece to his puzzle that next year. And while on campus, my whole thing was put myself in a position that I can get a scholarship so my parents didn't have to pay for college. It didn't matter where. It didn't matter what level I was. I didn't know the difference between Division I and Division II, those types of things. I just wanted an opportunity to go to college and play basketball. And so when getting to Fort Union there in the end of August, and we began to practice and run and things like that, you're jockeying for positions and you want to make an impact. Now, the one thing that I was a competitor, and I believed in myself, and I worked extremely hard. And so while there during those times, I was trying to make sure that I put myself in a position that I could possibly get an opportunity to play, because I played behind Merle Code my whole life, who ended up being the starting point guard at Clemson, who as well went to Fort Union. So I never started as a basketball player until my senior year in high school. And so I didn't want that to happen at Fort Union. And so I began to work and put myself in position. And every night after we finished study hall, I would just pray. I would pray and ask God to give me if I could get a scholarship to go to college. And so, that's why I tell people, be careful what you pray for, because a lot of my teammates at that time will tell you the hypothetical conversations that we were having in 2 to 3 weeks, a month later, were becoming reality for me. And so, I went, like I said, I went from a kid that wasn't recruited at all. Nothing, I wasn't all state. I was nothing. I began to get, recruited, and people began to call and ask about me, and my life began to change dramatically. And so one day, I was called out of my classroom and called to the office. And at Fork Union, you get called to the office, that was really obsolete. That just does not happen. Over the intercom, it's like, that doesn't happen. And so, I know I didn't do anything wrong, but it was, what's going on? And so I was called to the office. Coach Eric was there, and he began to tell me, he said, Shammond, there's Coach Chris from College of Charleston here. There was Coach Howard, who was assistant coach at Miami, and Coach Ellis from Clemson. And so I went to his office in the gym, and I met with those coaches for probably about 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. And so during that time, I ended up missing dinner. Dinner was at 5, and dinner would end, and then we would have practice because it was a Tuesday, Thursday. And so I missed dinner. And so when Coach came to the office, he said, well, Shammond, go eat dinner. So I went to go eat dinner, and I had to eat by myself because everybody else had eaten, and I had to leave dinner and come back to practice. And so I did that. I came back to practice. I'm putting on my uniform. I could hear my teammates upstairs running, getting ready for practice. And I go up the steps. And as I go up the steps, you could hear a substantial amount of coaches in there. And so as I walked through the door to begin running, I could hear people saying, okay, there he is, there he is. I could hear, but I wasn't looking, but I could hear. And so as I warmed up, and we began to play. And usually when your team wins, your team stays together, and coach, he'll change teams. And my team won, and he said, Williams, step off to the side. And I turned around and said, no, coach, my team won. He said, no, Williams. He said, I know, Williams, step to the side. And so he said, so as I stepped to the side, game began to play, and I'm standing there. He walks over to me. He says, when practice is over, Coach Smith wants to meet with you. And so I was like, Coach Smith. I said, oh, that's the guy from Virginia Tech. And he was like, no, Williams, that's, Coach Williams. And he pointed to, Coach Smith, and he pointed to him. He said, that's the head coach at the University of North Carolina. So when he pointed, I turned and looked, and Coach Smith was looking at me, and he waved and winked his eye. And so, to be honest, I had no idea who Coach Smith was. I didn't know about North Carolina. I grew up in South Carolina. I was a Clemson fan, so I really didn't know who Coach Smith was at all. I didn't even know the magnitude of it. And so he said to me, you're going to meet with Coach Smith. And then after you meet with Coach Smith, you're going to meet with Rick Pitino. And he pointed. And Rick Pitino was standing there as well. And I knew Rick Pitino because, I was born in New York, and my family has a background in New York as well as South Carolina. So I knew exactly who he was because of the New York background. And so I was like, okay, well, I knew who he was a little bit more. So after practice finished, I went to my coach's office where I had been all day, and Coach Smith walks through the door. He and Coach Guthridge, and they sat down in front of me, and he begins to talk about the University of North Carolina, and he said to me, I usually don't do these types of things because I like to find out more about kids and so on and so forth. He said, but I'd like to offer you a scholarship to the University of North Carolina. And he began to tell me that he had only did it like 2 or 3 times, like first time seeing somebody. And so, I was like, I appreciate it. And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, you're going to have to go to South Carolina and talk to my mama, and so, it was a great conversation. He was really impactful in that regard, but just a good person. You could tell he was a good person, but I didn't know about the institution at all. Then Patino comes in, and Patino, says, I'm going to offer you a scholarship on the spot, and you can be my starting point guard, and so on and so forth. And I told Patino the same thing. You got to go to South Carolina and talk to my mom. And so, that was the first encounter that I had with North Carolina and Coach Smith. And, when I left the office, everybody had gone back to their rooms. And I went back to my room, and my roommate, he was like, you met with Dean Smith? And I was like, yeah. He was like, that's North Carolina. And I was like, yeah. He was like, you don't understand this. Nah, I don't. And so, I didn't really, even with him talking, I didn't know the magnitude of it till the next day when I got with my teammates. Everybody kept talking about this Dean Smith, this Dean Smith. And I was like, I said, he's cool. He was cool. Got him like Howard. He was cool. He was a nice person. But I really did not know the magnitude of being offered a scholarship to the University of North Carolina.
So I'm going to ask the obvious follow-up, which at least is obvious to me, is probably obvious to Tommy. How did the conversation when he went and talked to your mama go?
Oh, they had a great time. They had an awesome time from what I understand. Because for me, my whole mentality about playing basketball in college was totally different. I just wanted an education, and I wanted to be appreciated. And so at this time, unbeknownst to probably people that's listening, Eddie Fogler becomes the head coach at the University of South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And so when Eddie Fogler becomes the head coach of South Carolina, the first person he starts to recruit is me. And so here it is. There's somebody that really, has taken a liking to me. I had never experienced that from any college coach, in that regard. And so, here it is, his first opportunity, and I'm the guy that he really wants. And so my whole mentality was, I can go to South Carolina, and here it is. I got a coach that really cares about me and really wants me from day one. And so where everybody was probably more focused on Kentucky and North Carolina, I myself at that time was focused on South Carolina. And so, my mom and them liked Coach Fogler. My mom liked Coach Smith. And they liked Coach Patino as well. But it was something about Coach Smith that separated himself from them in some regard, because I know that my mom kept pushing North Carolina on me. And I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm going to have to just see what happens. And so to make a long story short, I ended up going on my first official visit to the University of South Carolina, where I had some siblings also go to South Carolina. And I had a great visit, South Carolina, Alabama football game, great visit. My family was there. Everything was nice. That Sunday morning after the Alabama football game in 1993, I committed to the University of South Carolina. And Eddie Fogler was happy, and all the coaches were happy, but my mom and Dan Peterson, no one was smiling. Nobody was happy. Nobody was clapping. And so after we finished, my mom put me to the side. Her and Coach Pete, they said, "You're not going to South Carolina?" And I was like, "Yes, I am. You know, yes, I am. I'm going to South Carolina." And they were like, "No, you're not going to South Carolina." And I'm like, "Yeah, all right." And so I take my flight back to Fort Union. Now, everybody that knows my mom, my mom is 6'2", probably 235 pounds, easy, you know, and she's extremely physical. You know, I always say she took her prom picture. Well, she took her prom picture like this, you know. And so, you know, she's an intimidating figure for sure. And so after committing to South Carolina, here it is that week. Never forget it. Coach Fogler comes up to Fort Union. And so he comes, you know, I'm like, "Hey, Coach, what's going on?" He's like, "Shammond, I need to talk to you." It's like, "All right, cool," you know. And so we sitting down talking, and he says to me, he said, "Shammond, you, he said, you know, we really want you in South Carolina." He said, "But, you know, I had a chance to play for the best. So should you." And so I didn't know where he was going with this. And I'm like, "Yeah, all right. Oh, you know, what do you mean?" You know, in my head, I'm like, "How did you play for yourself?" But then he began to explain to me that he attended the University of North Carolina and he played for Coach Smith. And I was like, "Oh, Eddie, don't worry about that, Coach Fogler. I know my mama probably got to you and you're a little scared. Don't worry about that. I'm going to take care of that. Don't you worry about that." And he was like, "No, you know, you should go to North Carolina." And so here it is, the person that I felt that really cared about me and wanted me to come to South Carolina and change that program. Here it is, he's telling me I need to go somewhere else. So, you know, I got a little offended by it. And I told him, I said, "Okay, you don't want me to come to South Carolina? No problem. I'm going to go to Kentucky." He was like, no, you can't go. Yeah, I'm going to Kentucky. No problem. And so this was probably around October 15th, somewhere around in there. And so I wasn't going to commit to a school until I took a visit. And so Patino, they were like, you know, they were recruiting Alan Edwards and myself. And so I called Kentucky and I set up my official visit to go to Kentucky for Midnight Madness. And so that Monday before Midnight Madness, Alan Edwards commits to Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And so Patino calls me and says, "Yeah, Alan Edwards committed to us, but we still want you. You know, we feel like you are the one that we really, really need." And so in my head, it was like, "No, you told me whoever committed first, you know?" And so, you know, my experience of playing behind people and so on and so forth in that regard, it just led me to say, "Hey, you know what? Call North Carolina and set up my official visit for Midnight Madness." And so really, I ended up going to North Carolina by process of elimination, unbeknownst to me. Probably more elimination from God and my mother.
Your mama got to Coach Fogler and said, "He ain't going to South Carolina."
He's not coming to South Carolina, or whatever the case may be. And I don't think it was probably my mother more than it was Coach Fogler's appreciation for Coach Smith. A lot of times, you know, Coach Smith wouldn't recruit kids that he felt like somebody in his family or one of his closest friends were recruiting. You know, like if it was Coach Fogler or John Thompson, he wouldn't recruit against them. You know, Coach Fogler being one of his own, and then Coach Thompson being one of his closest friends. Yeah. So, you know, I ended up going to North Carolina on it was parental intervention and divine intervention.
That's pretty awesome. That shows not only the reach of Coach Smith, but the impact of Coach Smith on his former guys. And
No question.
And I want to talk about that with you later in the show, but tell me
Right.
about that Midnight Madness visit. I guess that would have been October of '93. So that was
October
Stack
9th.
and Sheed and all those guys that got there. They're coming off the national championship. Describe that.
Well, it was quite interesting, and a lot of times, if you watch the Coach Smith documentary, the first day of practice that year, it actually, if you look, you'll see me sitting on the sideline with my mom and Miss Fogler and stuff like that. And a lot of time I reminisce about it, but not really knowing North Carolina like that. Once I got on my visit, like I was in my head, I was like, oh, this is where Jeff, I knew Jeff, I knew Stack, and I knew of Sheed. I had played against Jeff and Stack in AAU, but I didn't really know that they went to North Carolina. It wasn't something that I had researched. So once I got on my visit, I saw that Jeff was there and Jerry were there. And in my head, I began to think, oh, wait a minute. Jeff's here. We play the same position. You begin to think about, selfishly, like, oh, my opportunity to have the opportunity to play, may not be what I would like for it to be. And then Larry Davis was there, whom I knew because he was from South Carolina as well, and he had attended Fort Union Military Academy. Mm-hmm. And so, there was a lot of things to watch, but I like the way practice was ran. I really didn't like campus, and it's not like campus is bad. It was just, I think I was fighting within myself, people trying to make me go to a school that I hadn't cold-heartedly accepted myself.
Right.
So, there were a lot of excuses that I could make up in my head about what I didn't like about the campus and what I didn't like about the visit. But one thing I did enjoy, it was Coach Smith. That's the truth. Like, I really enjoyed him, like just how he handled himself, how he handled people, and the one thing that I grew up on from my social economic background is how to deal with people and how to handle people. My environment dictated that a great deal, and I watched how he moved. I watched how he just he was revered. And so it stood out to me more than anything else. The basketball, the Smith Center, all those things, it really stood out to me how he was as a person. And so, and the other thing that stood out to me was the business school. Truth be told, it's the business school. and they were like, well, it's extremely difficult to get into business school. And depending on, your time, could you, take the caseload and so on and so forth. And so, that was a challenge. And anybody knows Shammond Williams is, you give him a challenge, he's going, now he's going to rise to the occasion. And so those two things stood out to me, Coach Smith and the Keenan Flagler Business School, because at that time, my focus was trying to get to Wall Street. I wanted to work on Wall Street. That was my dream. And so, decision needs to be made. I like Coach Smith. The business school seems like it could be a great thing for me in my future moving forward. And so lo and behold, I don't even remember committing to North Carolina. I just think I remember just signing the papers.
Just showed up.
Yeah,
hands down, Tommy, before you asked it, hands down, this is the best recruiting story that we've heard on this show, easily.
Well, it's the truth.
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to hear you describe it. So you sign the papers and you show up
Mm-hmm.
there. I guess in the fall of or the summer of '94. So they're
Mm-hmm.
coming off a year. They were good, but they fell short at Boston College game. Stack, Jerry, and Rashid are still there, along with I guess Dante was the starter on that team. Describe being a freshman on just to put it bluntly, on a loaded Carolina team. How was that mentality? You talking about
Well,
a challenge?
yeah. Well, once I had made, once the decision had been made to go to North Carolina, I did begin to see the impact of playing at North Carolina. Finishing out my prep school year, we played against some great teams, the MCIs, the Hargraves, and a lot of guys that were quote unquote deemed to be ranked higher than me. You begin to hear this guy shouldn't be going to North Carolina and so on and so forth. So that made me. I already competed at a high level, but now it allowed me to perform at a high level. So now, okay, you don't think that I'm capable? I'm going to show you tonight. And so, I was blessed enough to have some blistering games just off of people saying, hey, you know what? He shouldn't be going to North Carolina. And even, and I was even hearing that from South Carolina, from where I was from. People, he going to, kid that had no scholarship offers, he disappears for a few months. The next thing they hear in the paper, he's going to North Carolina. It's
That's
crazy.
a great point.
So I began to hear all these things and internalize it. And so here it was. Okay, when I got to campus, remind you, Rashid, Jerry, Jeff, we all graduated high school together. So it's not like we're not the same age. I'm just behind them athletically, and because they were better than me. And so, when I got to campus, there was no backup point guard. And Jeff had played behind Derek Phelps. And so I was like, hey, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to compete for this job just as much as he even though he has more experience. And so when I hit campus, it was pretty much to let people know that I had arrived. They had ranked the top 17 players that were coming to the ACC that year, and I was number 15. So, that wasn't something that I wanted to remain. And so, I put that on my window. And when I got to campus, Shammond Williams wasn't going to do much. I wasn't going to deviate from much. I was going to do what was asked of me. Most definitely, I was going to do my classwork, and I was going to be in the gym. And so, just coming to campus, it was just more or less earning the respect. Well, I had played against Jerry and Jeff, so I knew those guys. But the older guys, it was pretty much letting them know, hey, man, I'm gonna be honest. My thought process was, I'm not here to wave a towel. I'm not here to wave a towel. And so that meant there was work to be done.
You got it, Joey. I'll let you get in because I could go on forever because it's pretty amazing.
So let's talk about, and this is one of the more, again, you talk about a talented team. The 1998 squad, it was, Coach Smith is retired. Bill Guthridge has essentially 6 starters, and that was what it was called. And that was your last year on campus. What was that dynamic like? Because you had proven yourself by this point. You had kind of gone through some growing pains as a young player, acclimating yourself to Coach Smith and now Coach Guthridge's system. You'd played with a lot of talented guys. Again, you had elevated yourself to getting, all conference recognition and being noticed by everybody outside of the program. What was it like in that 6-starter system where you guys were just so lethal and you weren't deep? But man, the 6 guys that you guys played were real good.
Oh yeah, we had a great basketball team. I mean, and that was the thing about the University of North Carolina. We were always team oriented, and I I was a little apprehensive about the starting six-man starting rotation, because that was something Coach Smith had never done. So it was like, what is this? Especially your senior year. It's like, it just, for me, it was a little difficult to comprehend. I never understood why. But we had some talented guys. There's no question about it. Even a lot of guys that didn't have an opportunity to play for us, they were really talented. Like the Max Owens, the Orlando Melendez, the newbies, Brendan Haywood. We had a great basketball team. And just because guys didn't get an opportunity to play as much didn't mean that they weren't talented. It was just, that's just what North Carolina was. You sacrifice yourself for the better of the team. And so that thought process of sacrifice yourself for the better of the team was what kind of made it a little easier for me to accept the six-man starting role.
Do you have, and let me ask, and I don't want to cut you off, but do you have any do you know why Guthridge did that? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea, because when it was announced to us, I was like, like I said, I was, and I was kind of vocal. I was vocal. I didn't say anything. It was a decision that had been made, so it wasn't. I was going to say anything derogatory to Coach Guthridge, but when we were having conversation as a team, I would. Do any of you understand why this is? Could you not make a decision on who wasn't going to start? And those types of things. And it's interesting because we all look back and we, a lot of people consider us to be one of the best teams that never won a national championship. And Antoine and I were having this conversation the other day. If there's, out of our whole career at the University of North Carolina, there's only one thing that we would change, and that's not winning a national championship. And as I began to watch, I always watch these national championship games and teams. The one thing that I felt like we possibly could have done, I told Antoine this, had I known that we would not have won a national championship, I would have sacrificed and just came off the bench. Because all those teams that have won national championships, they had a talented player to sacrifice for the better of the team and come off the bench. And so if that's what Shammond Williams needed to do for us to win a national championship, then I would have done that. Because everything else, was great, but I only came back my senior year to win it. After the junior year that I had I known that maybe Coach Smith was going to resign, I probably would have left and probably gone to the NBA because of, the run that I had at that point in time. And so, my thought process, I only came back to win it. And so when they said we would have the six, well, it was one thing that Coach Smith to resign. But when they said the six-man starting rotation, and I went home and I looked at the calendar, I started going down the calendar. And I said to myself, when we get to the Final Four, I'm not going to start. I remember that.
I did the math.
Do math. This because I knew why I was there.
Right.
So not making the Final Four, being paid for that championship, there was no, I knew exactly the plan. Yeah. And as I went down that schedule, I went through my ACC championship, I said, I'm not going to start. So that really kind of made it a little different for me as well. But, hey, I thought we did a great job with it. Maybe that's the first and the only time that's ever happened. I don't know.
That's I will tell you, from a fan base perspective, I doubt you'll find the topic more discussed than that decision right there. And that's why I asked, did even the players understand it? I think he just couldn't tell somebody no. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't certainly not in the locker room, but that's what it seemed like to me.
Mhm.
He just couldn't tell one of you guys, hey, you're coming off the bench. But like you said, had you known, but let me ask you from a player standpoint, just a purely player preparation and all that. Talk about the difference of starting a game versus coming off the bench and the mindset difference, because I don't think people necessarily understand it. But obviously it affects
Well,
guys.
yeah, I mean, from where I came to where I was at that point in time in my career, I had pretty much conditioned. I had gotten to a condition where I could come off the. I could, I was a, I had ingratiated myself with the role of starting. I mean, because my freshman year I played probably about 3-4 minutes a game, if that. Then my sophomore year I came off the bench, which that role, I thought I had a pretty good role, and I did a pretty good job with that role coming off the bench because that was my mindset. So now here it is as a starter. For me personally, as a starter, I led team to the Final Four. So now with my focus and what the impact that I'm trying to make on the game for my team, it's a totally different feel. It's a totally different mindset because I attack from the beginning. It's just built in me, and I had gotten to that point to where I relished it, and so the games. I mean, you look at that year for me. Games that I started, I averaged 18 to 20, 22 points a game, and games I came off the bench, I averaged 7 points.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, maybe, psychologically, I'm not a complainer, so this is just what it is. I'm just gonna go and do what's asked of me. But when you get older and you begin to analyze, having aspirations on being a head coach, one day myself, you begin to look at those things and you take into account, what could be the impact of the decisions that you make for your team and for those individuals as well.
Do you remember if you started the Georgia Tech game in Atlanta?
I started the Georgia Tech game.
I have to ask about that one because we did one of the other podcasts that we do on Inside Carolina. I called it the throwback, and as we could go back and look at old games, and one of those games was this game in Atlanta where you absolutely burnt the arena down. Do you remember your mindset about that game, or was there somebody that set you off beforehand?
No, I'll be honest. For me, I was always playing for respect. Each and every game that I played for respect. And I just really felt I never got the respect. And so every time I stepped on the floor, I was playing to prove people wrong. Be it not the Carolina fans, but people on the outside that were watching, and even, like I said, even people from my hometown. I was playing to show people that I could be. And the Georgia Tech game, it was a difficult game. I mean, you look at that team that Georgia Tech had; they had 4 pros on their team as well.
Yep.
And so, and that's just what the ACC was back then. And so, my thing was trying to trying to put myself in a position that people would appreciate what I brought to the game. And so in that game, you had to take everybody's best punch. And, it was a knockout, drag out. And I felt like we did not close that game out in regulation. And so the one thing that I kind of appreciated about my teammates was if the game ever went to overtime, then it was like they would follow me, they would, let's get the ball to Shammond and because of my experience. And so here it was going into overtime, I was like, listen, there's a lot of game left and we got work to do. And, my senior season at North Carolina was a great season, but it was kind of difficult as well. And if you watch throughout that game, you would see me having conversations with the sideline. And at that point in time, those conversations that I was having was, would it be okay if I took this guy? You know what I mean? Would it be okay if I took this shot? Just those types of things that were going on at the time. And my teammates, they most definitely believed in me. And I'm not saying that my coach didn't believe in me, but it was kind of like like a not a big conflict, but some type of conflict in some regard. And that Georgia Tech game, I didn't really know how many points I scored. It really wasn't that important because we wanted to win. We were a team and we cared about each other and we didn't care who scored it or whatever the case may be. And the one thing that I do remember about that game was because it was so tiring that I remember the game was over, it just finished, and I was holding my shorts. I was bent over holding my shorts. And Steve Kirshner ran up to me and he was like, "Are you okay? You okay?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Do you know what just happened?" I said, "No." He said, "Do you know how many points you just scored?" I said, 25. He said, "No, 42." And I was like, okay. Okay.
So
and,
casual with it.
Yeah, because it wasn't about the points. I didn't understand the magnitude of it. What I didn't want was people to say, Shammond, Shammond's the leader of this team and they lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, Kirshner was the one that brought it to my attention. And, and like I said, we didn't care. My teammates didn't. I mean, it's not even like I looked at a score sheet after that because that's just not what we did. Because we believed so much in each other and didn't care who got the reward, And so, I was able to get 42 points because of what my teammates believed in me.
Let me ask you this, and I wouldn't ask this if you hadn't been so vulnerable with us so far. And you're incredibly self-aware anyway. Just like in our interactions so far, I can tell you're an incredibly self-aware person. And it sounds like you were then as well. But you've talked about this drive. And I don't want to get too Oprah Winfrey on you, but you've talked about this desire to prove things to people. When you're trying in that mindset to prove something to someone, is there anybody you have in your mind? Or is there something at some point in your life where you just felt like was the turning point that made you have that chip on your shoulder? Because it's obviously worked so well for you.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a person per se. I think knowing from where my family came from, and my grandfather. My grandfather was like the backbone of his family, and a lot of the attributes that we have come from him. My grandfather was 6'5", and everybody in my family plays basketball. Like, my younger cousin is Kevin Garnett. We're first cousins. So, for me to be, I am actually the shortest in my family from first cousins to second. I'm the shortest. And so, you know, having to navigate that environment was not bad because I was probably the shortest, but in my family, I'm probably like my grandfather was the guy, and then when my grandfather passed, that responsibility was placed upon my shoulders. Not my uncle's shoulders and nobody else. It was placed upon my shoulders. So I'm kind of like that dude for my family.
Hmm.
And it was a lot of things that needed to be done for us to get out of that mentality or that social economic entrapment in that regard. So, Shammond Williams at the University of North Carolina had a lot to prove, not just on the court, but off the court, because I was the first person to graduate from my family in college, which is my greatest accomplishment because it became a prerequisite for everybody now in my family to go to college. Here it is. I graduated in '98, and then maybe 7-8 years later, I had a cousin, another first cousin, graduate from the University of North Carolina as well. And so it just, for me, it was for all the have-nots. A lot of people, I can say I felt like appreciated me as a person because of how I carried myself. But I always felt like people didn't understand, like the fans. I call them, you say the fans, but I'm only saying fans now because you can understand the difference, because there are no fans and there are no Carolina basketball players. We're all just the Carolina family. But I'm talking about the fans' perspective right now. I don't think the fans understood that I was more like them than I was the basketball player. And that's how I always carried myself. I didn't want them, like I had probably more in common with you than I probably had in common with my teammates. I was a have-not. And so when you begin to talk about the have-nots, when I have these, I sit down with my son and my daughter, and we look. My son, he's 8, but he's very intelligent. He looks at the books. He's looking at he might hear something about records. He might be, Daddy, you got records. He'll start looking at your name, and you start looking at the book and see his name and so on and so forth. And because he's a junior, he looks and he's like, Daddy, you're at the top, and you're this and you're that. And I begin to run through my mind. I say, one day he'll understand that all those guys that my name is with, those were the best players in the country when they left high school. Those guys were all state. Those guys were top 100. And here it is, I was barely all conference. And so is that something that you just take and say, you know what? I accept it. No, you should accept it. But what are you going to do about it? And so as a man, it was like, Shammond, you can sit here and complain why people didn't pick you all state or didn't appreciate you. But what are you going to do about it? And so my trek started as, all right, here we go. I'm going to prove to you guys that I'm better and I'm more than capable than you think I am. And like you said, it's worked great for me.
Thanks for opening up.
Yeah, that's definitely a mindset that more people need. And you kind of went where I was thinking about going when you were talking, is the biggest misconception about guys like yourself, Carolina basketball players, any basketball players, college players, pro players. What do you think that biggest misconception is from people on the outside looking in?
Well, yeah, I think
times have changed. Or since?
Yeah, yeah. I was about to say times have changed dramatically. You know, a lot of times, whether you want to understand it or not, there's a lot of responsibility placed on these athletes, um, and because of their talent, does not change the individuals. And a lot of times, some of these kids are so talented that they're objectified. And so when you're objectified, people are less likely, well, let me say, some people are less likely to hold you accountable because of your athletic prowess or what you could do for a team or an environment or a community. And for me, I feel like that is the biggest problem because a child will be what you teach him. And so if nobody's teaching this kid that this is not the way that you're supposed to act or the way that you're supposed to handle yourself, then how are they supposed to know? You can't hold somebody accountable for something that they don't know. And the one thing that we have a problem with as people is a lot of times we'll look at a person and we'll say, I can't believe they act like that. Or I can't believe that they would do this. And the only reason you feel that way is because you're not them. Maybe you've been taught. Maybe your environment has set things in order for you to have an understanding of how to and how not to do things. And so I'm not going to say it's not their fault, but it's really the individual's fault that has an issue with what they've done, because you're expecting them to handle the situation like you would handle it. And if that's the case, if they handle the situation the way that you would handle it, then what makes you special? And so, I've learned to not criticize or judge a person by, the way that they do things, but understand that I'm blessed that I don't. But more importantly, how can I make an impact to help that person understand that this is not how you do it? And the only way that you can do it is you have to have a thought process and a moral compass of, I'm only telling you this because I want you to understand and know. There's nothing that I want from you. There's nothing that, I'm trying to use you for. I'm just trying to help you get an understanding of this is how you should probably handle yourself, because this is what people, unfortunately, you may not want this, but because of what you do, people hold you in high regard.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of people get the misconception that athletes have been taught how to carry themselves in all environments. No, that's not the case, and that's the one thing that you can really, really appreciate about Coach Smith. That there, you wasn't gonna have an issue with one of his players, because that was first and foremost. You're gonna know how to handle yourself and carry yourself as a Carolina basketball player and a representation of this institution. That was first. People think it's basketball. No basketball. It was that first. And so you understood how important, the people that supported you were. You understood that it was bigger than you. You understood that you were representing somebody other than yourself. And so once Coach Smith made sure that, people from all walks of life understood, hey, this is the responsibility that you have when you accept the scholarship to attend this institution and be a part of this program. You begin to appreciate that and understand, hey, you know what? I have a responsibility that's bigger than just putting that uniform on and playing basketball those 34 games a year.
Man, you and I are vibing on the exact same plane. Because as I was going to say, and your point about people assuming folks know how to act, is just not true. I mean,
Right.
I work in a field, not inside Carolina related, where it's pretty clear that some people have no shot or no hope because they've never been taught, and they don't,
Mm-hmm.
for lack
Never
of a
had
better way.
a chance to be taught, some of them.
Yeah, exactly. And then one thing, I've been working for Inside Carolina for 22 years now and covering you guys, your
Mm-hmm.
senior season and then beyond. What you realize in a hurry in this line of work is that, like you said earlier, you guys are just us with talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're all the same, and it's all one big family. And you started talking about Coach Smith. Shammond, how have you paid that forward in your life? Clearly you have, but describe that for our listeners, how you took everything growing up, but then you get to Carolina and you got Coach Smith, who everybody speaks highly of. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if there's somebody that speaks bad of Coach Smith, I've never met him. But it's
Doesn't
specifically for what you just talked about. How do you pay that forward? How does society pay that forward, those teachings forward, to make this, not to get too deep, but to make this world a better place?
Well, I mean, where it started out, I didn't know the magnitude of being at the University of North Carolina and playing for Coach Smith. I began to understand those things, probably, quick once getting to campus. But being around him, and I would say Coach Smith and our relationship, we always had a good relationship, because there was a lot of things that Shammond Williams went through at the University of North Carolina. But Coach Smith was always the guy who stood by his word. And I think he and our relationship changed a great deal when he decided to resign, because the one selling point that he always made clear to me was, Shammond, I'm going to be there for your 4 years. And so I think because he did resign, he felt like he didn't stick up to his word with me in that regard. And so it was like our relationship, like it like even blossomed even further,
Wow.
And the one thing Coach Smith, he kind of, he said, like, like, I wanted you guys to be around the kids when you leave the program. I wanted you guys, to teach them and teach them, our ways and so on and so forth. And everything Coach Smith said to me, I took it literally. I mean, I was drafted in 1998. I started building my house in Chapel Hill in August of 1998. And so it took so from 98, and I got into coaching in 2012. I was in Chapel Hill every summer. And so Coach Smith, everything that he asked me to do, I tried to do. He said, how you treat people, understand it's a Carolina family. Don't think that you're any better than anybody else just because of, the uniform that you wear. I mean, that has to be life. I mean, it's principles. I mean, it's his words, but it's principles that come from the Bible. And so, we have to understand that even though we come from different walks of life, we can have a great environment, and 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 treating people the way that you want to be treating people fairly, treat everybody the same. And I made this statement to somebody, like, I remember, I say this all the time because it's so true. When I was coaching at Tulane, we were playing at ECU, and the security guard came to me. He said, "This is a little guy coming out. It's out here that says that he played basketball with you, and he wants you to come out." And I was like, "A little guy?" He's like, "Yeah, he's short." He said, he played basketball with me? He said, yeah. He said, hold on, I'll find out more. So he went back out, came back. He said, he played with you at North Carolina, a little short guy. I said, Webb Tyndall. He said, yeah, I think that's his name, Webb Tyndall. And I was like, yeah. I said, yeah, that's my teammate. And he was like, he played with you? I said, yeah, he played with me. That's my teammate. And the whole statement was, I didn't want him to think about, like a lot of times people say, well, this guy made the team by being a walk-on and so on and so forth. That's for conversation for people that, that may not understand the magnitude. But he wasn't a walk-on. He was my teammate. And Coach Smith made sure that we understood, hey, no matter how you got there, everybody's going to be treated the same. If you didn't know North Carolina basketball yourself and you watched us in practice or watched us come into an environment, you would know who was averaging 20 points or you didn't know who didn't even play in the game. And that right there is what's missing, not only in life, but missing in the game as well. Everybody has to be held accountable, but more importantly, everybody has to be treated the same. Even though they may not be bringing the same things to the table, just because they don't bring the same things to the table does not mean that they're not important. And Coach Smith made everybody feel like they were important. And
this is hands down going to be the longest and probably deepest of the 40 clubs that we've done. And I mean, we're
good.
We're an hour in. We're an hour in, and I don't want to change a thing. Let me ask you. You had a very long, very productive professional career, both in the NBA and then overseas. Which, by the way, I one of my life goals is to live in Spain, and you not only lived there but played there in just some of the most beautiful places in the world. But I'm gonna give you a quick, simple question about your pro career. Who was the best player you ever played with?
Played with?
Mm-hmm.
Who?
I think it's going to be easy, but you got to go back and compare, right?
The best player I've ever played with.
Because you played with Kobe with the Lakers, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he's still thinking, though.
He's the most talented player I played with, for sure. He's the most talented. Yeah, he's the most talented player.
But that's not the best.
Yeah.
I'm different. I'm different. You know what I mean? Like Kobe and I, we had a great relationship, man, and he was an outstanding dude. And the one thing I think that really resonated with Kobe and I was at the time when I had come and played with the Lakers, I had already been to Europe. I had played in Europe, and I had played with some guys. I played with some great players in Europe, and I understood the culture and the mentality. And Kobe was pretty much raised in Europe.
Right.
And so, I think where a lot of people may have felt like he was a little different, I never felt that way because he and I built our relationship off competing against each other when I played with the Sonics. And we would have those battles with the Lakers, and he and I would end up playing against, guarding each other and so on and so forth. And so we would really go at one another. So we had built our relationship on that. And so when I got an opportunity to go play with them and being in that environment with them every day, I can say this. You're talking about basketball-wise, he is the most talented player. He's the best talented player I've ever seen in my life. It was, you would see things that you saw in the games, though. Those wouldn't do him any justice because some of the things that you would see in practice, I remember seeing him like just his pure agility, like he was calling for the ball one time and the guy was setting up to take a charge and he caught the ball and turned and the guy was standing right there and he like took 2 steps and like wrapped the basketball around him and didn't even touch the guy. And I looked and I said, like me talking about it does it no justice. I said to one of my teammates, I said, the man has to be possessed by the devil. I said, the Lord didn't give anybody that type of talent and ability, just being facetious, because it was like, and I had seen the best of the best. So, but he was the most talented player I'd ever seen. Now, the best player, I wouldn't say the best player, because I played with I didn't play with him, but I've been on the court with Michael, and that was that was I don't know if there's words. I mean, but Michael, man, he was different. It was like his ability was like blistering, like to get to point A to point B, if you blinked, you would miss it. You'd be like, how did he get to the rim? Because he was already there. And because of his ability in that regard of being able to be so dynamic with least dribbles, I think that's what made him so polarizing. He just, those are two guys that were blessed with great packages, just the perfect package.
And
but yeah, Kobe's the as a teammate, he's the most skilled, best player. I had some other teammates that were really good players, but they were great people too, man. And so when you start saying best, it just show you how my mindset is. I don't also go for talent. I go by the person as well. Not saying that Kobe wasn't a great person, but I had some good.
Who's the best human being you ever played with? Just over around, like best the person.
Vin Baker.
Rephrase. Vin Baker.
Vin Baker.
In Seattle.
Hands down.
Wow.
Hands down. Nobody comes close.
Wow.
Vin Baker, and then probably Grant Hill. But Vin Baker, because I was young, rookie, second year player, and the things that he did for us as young men, just set the tone for us, because he was more our age. He's a little bit older than us, but he took the responsibility of a veteran and of a father for a lot of us that didn't know how to navigate those waters, and he would cook for us every night. Went out of town, he would take us out to eat. He wouldn't let you pay for anything. He was, he understood that he was like, man, I'm blessed. You could see, you could tell that his father was a minister, because just how he just carried himself amongst others, and he was selfless, and he was just at the right age to understand some things. Hadn't been far removed from where we were. So he was by far the best teammate, like person, and that's not to say that a lot of other guys weren't impactful. Like I remember, like I can easily go through my vets that were impactful to me, because of what they challenged me to be as a man while being young. Steve Smith, Mutombo, Patrick Ewing, David Wingate, Juwan Howard, those guys, those guys right there were impactful to me in some regard in my career, by their information and them being men.
Yeah.
I hope Juwan Howard works out in Michigan. Had a chance to cover them at the Battle for Atlantis last year down in Nassau, and he seems like a genuinely good dude and needs to be coaching young men like that.
Yeah, he will. Yeah,
Let's
he'll be.
and you could tell his players. Of course, they wore Carolina out, but you could tell his players felt that way about him, even in his whatever first or second year it is. Let's circle it back to Carolina. And again, Shammond, you've been great to join us for a long time, and
Oh no, I enjoy it. This is fun. I'm enjoying.
we could talk forever. Let me ask you some hard, tough questions. 95 versus 98 Carolina team. You got to be objective.
Because you were on both. You got to pick one.
You got to put yourself in 95 with Stack and Sheed, and then 98 and Touche, and then you, Jameson, and Carter, 98. Who wins those games? Who's better? Can't go to the group chat.
Well, 95, Shammond Williams only plays 3 minutes a game. 98, Shammond has big impact. You know, he's going to be looked upon to do a few more things. I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to go with the 98 because I'm playing more.
No wrong answers. There's no wrong answers. That works. And I love the way you broke that down.
Reasoning.
Right.
Yeah. Reasoning.
You got to look out for Shammond. We
in that regard. I mean, I would like to see some other things, but you put some great players up against each other, and and so why do that when I can just put myself up against myself? Shammond played 3 minutes in 95.
That is the most simple, distilled, beautiful answer I think we've gotten on this show.
Yeah.
Shammond 98 is like, I can take that dude, that 95 dude. I got him.
The 95 dude wasn't gonna play much, so the 98 guy was gonna get to play as long as it wasn't one of the games I had to sit out.
Yeah, you're the sixth man on this match.
Right.
Yeah, as long as it wasn't the Final Four game.
So, most memorable Carolina moment can be on the court, can be off the court. Denard Searcy, football player, said meeting his wife at Carolina. So, doesn't have to be sports related, but it can be.
My biggest accomplishment memory was graduation 1998, and my grandfather, because he had lost his leg, he and my grandmother being at my graduation and walking down the stadium, and my they had the handicapped people could sit down on the field.
Yeah.
And my granddaddy seeing me graduate,
that's what it's about.
I love that.
Yeah.
Any regrets? What's a regret that Shammond Williams has?
I should have came off the bench on that 98 team.
Should have volunteered.
Yeah. I should have said, you know what, I'll just come off the bench. If I'd known that was going to help us win a national championship, just something that, but I mean, that's superficial, but truth be told, there's no regrets about going to University of North Carolina at all. Like, I mean, my home's there. I mean, it changed my life. It didn't only, that's one thing one thing that I was able to see Coach Smith. I think I probably was the last player to be with him before he died. Come and see him before he died. The one thing that I always made sure that I told him was I appreciated him, because not only did he change my family's life, he changed my community's life as well. And I've been able to help so many other kids because of what he saw in a kid that many others didn't see. And, I had a kid that was drafted number 4 in the draft of Wednesday night, I was able to teach him some things that I was able to learn because of the opportunity Coach Smith, you know, gave me. You know, the things that we're able to do at the Children's Hospital, I'm able to do those things because of the opportunity Coach Smith gave me. You know, you just never know the impact that you can have on society with your belief in one person or the opportunity that you present for one person. You just never know. And to think about, he did that forever until he left this earth. And so, you know, when you have somebody like that you have to follow, you understand. Like each and every day, I understand the responsibility that I have. And and I don't take it lightly at all. You know, I think, you know, from the old school Carolina players to the new school Carolina players, I make sure that I do my part. And so it can continue on, do my part.
I think that one of the things that you've been able to do, not only just evangelizing about the culture that Coach Smith created and that, you know, Roy Williams has helped to maintain and that all the players have helped to cultivate, is in your new podcast. It's called The Carolina Conversation. And the episodes that I've heard, there's a lot of that commonality in that thread of just what Carolina basketball is about. Why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers about your vision for that show and why you started it?
Well, I know that you may think it may be bigger than what you know. The reason it started was bigger than, you know. Well, there was some reason behind it, but it was also kind of superficial as well. Jeff Goodman and Rob Dalster started the Field of 68 Media Network, and they wanted to have, you know, basketball institutions and so on and so forth represented. And Jeff gave me a call. He said, Shammond, you know, would like to do a podcast and have University of North Carolina represented. And, you know, would like to know, would you be interested in hosting it? And I said, I don't know, Jeff. He was like, well, you know, we have a lot of other schools. We have Syracuse, we have Villanova, we have, you know, Indiana, and we have Duke. I said, what? I said, you have who else? He said, Duke. I said, Duke has one. He said, yeah. I said, well, since you twist my arm, I have no choice. And so, you know, Jeff Goodman is the one who brought it to me. And as we began to talk, I helped Jeff understand. I said, now, I want you to understand when you're asking me to do this, that the Carolina conversation, and when we start talking about the Carolina family, you're not going to understand this. It's going to probably be totally different than any other school that you have. I said, because we're different. I said, so if you want me to do this, I don't mind doing it. I call it the Carolina, you know, we're going to call it the Carolina Conversation. But I want you to understand that our Carolina family is just bigger than basketball. And where you may not understand it, the people that's in the Carolina family, we understand it. And I said, well, you know, and so he said, hey, Shammond, you can do whatever you want to do, and so on and so forth. So I said, all right, cool. And so, you know, I've been able to get a lot of the greats. But you know, we also have, you know, we have Matt Roberts, the athletic director at the College of Charleston. I'm going to get Dick Bedour as well. And I'm actually going to see if I could get Mr. Chris and a lot of the guys who worked in the Smith Center.
Oh, wow.
Because, like these guys, the reason why you see the Shammond Williams and the Vince Carters and all these players that you celebrate is because of those guys.
Yeah.
Those guys have stories about us that, many people don't know. Like Mr. Chris, he could tell you, Shammond Williams in the gym at 2 a.m. in the morning, and Mr. Robbie and the security guard. Those are the people that are the pillars in the Carolina family, because they do the things each and every day that allows us the opportunity to put the product together for you guys to celebrate and to enjoy. And if those guys don't do the things that they do, there's no possible way that we can even be where we are in that regard. And I've never forgotten those guys. And truth be told, those are the best moments to come back. When I come to games, those are the best moments when I'm able to walk in there and I see Mr. Chris, he's at the gate letting people up now, doing things like that, just sitting there and talking to him for about 10 minutes, and introducing my children to him, like, hey, this guy used to help daddy sneak in, or, would let daddy, taught daddy how to cut the lights on, and those types of things, like, and seeing some of the ushers that are still there and letting them know, hey, you know what? I didn't forget you. I didn't forget you, and I didn't forget, how you treated my parents, how you treated my friends, when maybe they weren't supposed to be on the floor at that certain time, but because I'm taking too long to get out of the shower to come and get them, you built a relationship to know who they are as people, and you trust them, those types of things a lot of people overlook, like you let my parents, family go to the hallway, because you respect them and you've built a relationship with them that, oh, that's Miss Williams, or that's Reggie, those types, like that stuff right there, beyond all the games that could have been won, that's Carolina family. And, my podcast allows me to bring that to people, and get some of the inside stories of why we're like we are, and what goes on beyond the peripheral that you can appreciate, or, like you said before, why did they do that? Like, I think the one with Matt Doherty is like, I think it's explosive. I really like it because, Matt's my brother. Matt's my guy. He's my guy, and so, to have him talk about his experience and being the coach there, and some of the things that he felt like he should have done better. Just to bring things, full circle to his growth as a human being, or what he would have done different, just to hear those things for us as a family, because the one thing that we all do know, that none of us are perfect. And the one thing that Coach Smith never did, he never ostracized anyone, regardless of what they did and what downfalls that they may have had as a person, because I'm pretty sure that he dealt with some things himself, but more importantly, he wanted everybody to know, hey, in the family, there's going to be some things that people are going to make some mistakes. They're going to have some hiccups, but that's not what's important. How do we circle around those individuals and get them back to who they were and where they were, and keep supporting, because you never know when you're going to need that yourself.
and that is the Carolina Conversation that Shammond is talking about. You can get it on iTunes, or I'm sorry, Apple Music, or anywhere that you find podcasts, but search the Carolina Conversation. Shammond's been doing those for a little while. The episodes that I've heard have been absolutely phenomenal, and I think most of the folks that are listening and watching this podcast will definitely appreciate what you're doing on that show. But Shammond, we have taken almost an hour and a half of your time, and I can't say enough how much we appreciate you opening up to us and being vulnerable and sitting down on the couch and having a conversation with us. It's been a lot of fun.
That's what family does for one another. That's what family does. So, hopefully, God permitting, one day, I get an opportunity to be a head coach, and same people that's listening to come and support me as well. So, it just comes full circle one way or the other. But I enjoyed it, man. I like this. This is awesome.
Well,
you guys.
You're certainly welcome. Anytime you want to get on here and talk and talk about the family, you hit Joey up, you hit me up. We'll get you on, man. It's been, like Joey said earlier, we've done a lot of these with a lot of different type folks and a lot of different former guys. And you at the top of the list right now, man, for what you brought and what you shared. It's pretty amazing. And much respect for you on where you came from and what you've made yourself, not just Carolina basketball related, but in life. You pretty impressive young man still. I can say that still.
Dare I say, I do think Coach Smith is probably proud of what he was able to do to help you, but more so what you have done with that, from everything you've done. So I gotta say, I'm sure he's proud of you. But for Shammond Williams, for Tommy Ashley, we appreciate you guys listening. This has been the 40 Club here on Inside Carolina, InsideCarolina.com. Special thanks to Johnny T-Shirt for supporting us and all of the content that we put out. We hope that you'll continue to look at InsideCarolina.com as your source for all of the information about North Carolina sports that you can find. A special shout out to John Siegley for producing. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk at you next time. Thank you very much.